Hi everyone, welcome to this very special edition of the Strength in the Numbers show. And we've got two fantastic guests today, Lance Rubin and Chris Argent. You might have heard or seen them before. They've been on our previous episodes of our show. And Lance and Chris were both on the recent Virtual Finance World Summit 2020. And it couldn't have been better timing because some of their conversations were around the adaptive finance function and also practically getting the digital finance org set up. So a lot of us are already dealing with those sort of things now. So what better opportunity than bring them onto the show? But before we introduce Lance and Chris, just sort of wanted to say we're going through some very interesting times, and some of the insights you'll get from this special edition will be very helpful to you, your friends and colleagues. But we also must recognize those that are working in the front lines for us and say a big thanks to them for putting their lives on the line, for protecting our communities, so that the rest of us can have this conversation and listen into these conversations. So before we get into the show, just introduce Lance and Chris. Lance, would you like to maybe sort of share a brief background for audience who may not be as familiar with you?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. I also want to shout out to Brad for hosting the Virtual Finance World Summit and the Outperformer. I think it was a great opportunity. I work quite closely with Brad, primarily to help in the financial modeling and now also the analytics space. So Chris and I had a battle a while back. For those that haven't heard it, it's still something I listen to whilst walking the dog, and I chuckle, and it's great about Excel is dead. So I'm an Excel nerd. I love financial models. I've built models for small projects, startups, and IPOs and project finance. So, but I've got into Power BI since Chris and I last battled it out, and I'm loving analytics as well. So, you know, for me, it's about the decision making. So my elevator pitch, when people say, well, what do? We help businesses solve complexity by helping them to make relevant, informed, and purposeful decisions with insight. So for us, it's actually irrelevant what the technology is. It's about the decision, and it's about how do you make a relevant decision that's informed and that has purpose and is actionable. So, you know, the way in which you do that is almost irrelevant. If you focus on the value of how you make that decision, then that's critical.
Hey, thanks for that intro, Lance. And before we get on with the battle, or resume the battle, over to Chris. Chris, would you mind maybe introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Chris Argent. I started out in finance and sort of rose up through the ranks to divisional CFO, and then moved into digital transformation probably about 10 years ago now. The traditional sort of finance transformation, and about sort of 3 or 4 years ago, I decided to go in sort of helping finance go on this data journey that I had been on, and we sort of coined the phrase digital finance now. And in short, I'm just on a bit of a mission to try and sort of revolutionize the roles in accounting and finance. It's a big ask, but I think the opportunity is massive, and it's great to talk to people like yourselves who are sort of thought leaders in this area, whether it's on the business partnering side, which is a perfect match to the sort of digital and data skill set, or whether it's on the digital side and we argue about how we get stuff done, all in good humor. I love all that conversation because it's what's needed, and it's a massive learning journey for finance to go on. And I've set up a network and a website called Generation CFO, which points to a lot of content and a lot of learning that people can do on this journey.
Thanks for that, Chris. And you know what, it's fantastic to have both you and Lance on the show today. You know, we're in different parts of the world, and that's just a sign of the times we're in. But to kick it off, if you were sort of looking back at the fantastic summit that the Outperformer just arranged, and again, perfect timing, virtual in nature, accessible to everyone around the world, what would have been the key takeaways for you if we were to wash up from the summit? Maybe Lance, has come to you on that one.
Thanks, Andrew. I think for me, the collaboration between all the speakers and the interconnectedness was fantastic. So I think if I think about Michael Flinderker, who spoke about automation, and even some of the opening discussions that Brad was leading, led into some of my discussions around financial modeling and how important that is during these times. And Chris, it does bring me warmth to compliment you, Chris, my arch nemesis, that he had a great slide, like me and we have these opposite ends, and it's him in the middle, about myself being more tech focused and solution focused, and then you have Brad and others, and Andrew, yourself, being more thought leader focused around partnering, and Chris sort of being the meat in the sandwich and bringing it together. And I think that's really great. I feel that the summit really brought some great content, but at a full spectrum around.
This is my yin-yang, right?
Your yin-yang slide, correct. The yin-yang
yeah.
slide is, for those that haven't seen Chris's talk, we'll definitely go have a look. And the yin-yang is great, because I think we all need to understand different parts of the finance function, and there'll be people in our team that will gravitate to the modeling and analytics world and the technology world and the automation world that Michael spoke about. And then there'll be people in the transformation space, which is where Chris focuses on, and actually leading change and understanding the digital finance landscape and all of those different mechanics, but not getting too hung up about the tools, to the others around, okay, well, you've got the tools, you've got the transformation, how do you add value? How do you actually communicate better? So there's some great speakers on there, also around, strategy with Rob. And I think, just rounding it out, Brad's just done a great job pulling it all together and just picking up some really good things. And I think the overall summit was about being purposeful and deliberate around some of these things. And I think that's the thing that's key, is that a lot of webinars are fluffy around some stuff. It's very sales focused.
Yeah.
There was no one that I saw. Yes, we all work in our businesses and we all got stuff on, but for me, yes, there was a bit of introduction of who we are, but it was about helping the finance team get what we were doing and transitioning and awareness. So yeah, I think for me, that's the key.
I think, as you say, Lance, there's still a lot of learning to be done. So, what we're trying to do is educate people to sort of take action, right? And what I loved about the whole series was, like I said, I was trying to think of how these people sit together and how it's sort of relevant for people signing in, because you sign in for one person maybe, and then you get 12 speakers and you're like, wow, do I sign up to every single one? And do I listen to every single one? So it was just this simple yin-yang, which I've described very quickly. If people aren't aware of the yin-yang single, it's sort of, it's about sort of opposites that complement each other. So you've got light and dark, and, hard and soft, and it's this sort of Chinese philosophy thing. And I think with me, I've seen these two massive trends, these mega trends. One is around creating value in finance, and finance business partnering is what we're kind of calling it in the UK and many other countries. And then to enable those business partners to have really good, sensible conversations with the business, and not our kind of traditional, measure and tell off because of poor results kind of approach to reviews. To really give value, we need to start working on the data and the digital side. So I sort of came up with the yin yang. And for me, the really important bit is, and which is where I focus, is the bit in the middle, which is bringing these two sort of crazy opposites together and educating everybody that, they're complementary. And if we can understand each other's worlds a bit more, then, we can all benefit from it. And, Lance, I encourage all the work that you do to sort of sit within finance, because the sort of the meeting of the minds between, accountant and business and digital skills is massively powerful. And that's kind of what we call digital finance. And I think everybody kind of had that message weaved into the summit, which is why it kind of sat really well together, whether you're at the business end or the change end or the digital end. So I loved it.
And I, just going through with that theme, Chris, this sort of digital now, I mean, transformation, if most people are going through it, whether in accounting practices or even in corporate finance, these programs seem to take a while, right? So what happens to those? Do they get sort of put on hold at the moment, or are people still working them through?
It depends. It depends sort of size of company you're in. And it depends, I think, how they're set up, because, you know, we work in a particular way where we don't physically have to be anywhere, you know, and people who are working in arguably sort of temporary short-term projects or programs, you know, they just want the best resource in the world to come together. So the chances are they're working remotely. And working in all these new ways that people are working now, but we've been doing it for years and kind of take it for granted. So I think that some of these programs will continue, some of them may stall, depending on how they're set up. But I think the one thing to acknowledge here, as we've all done from the very start, is that, you know, people might be mega busy just trying to survive a cash flow issue or, you know, an operational change. So, you know, if we have to pause some of these sort of bigger changes, then I think that's okay. But we will come back to them very soon. You know, you see the green shoots in China already of, you know, people starting to, you know, go back to work, cafes starting to open again, and, you know, there's momentum building there. So yes, it's a bit dire now, but I'm sure within a short space of time we'll get back on track. And one of my messages, you know, without going into it too much, is that massive change where projects do have to come to a solid halt when we get to sort of blockers like this. I think they're an old way of working, and they don't particularly work very well in finance. You know, finance is a unique offer to the business. We're specialists in what we do. We're highly numerate, and that's a skill in itself. And then you lob on digital, and this is quite a complex thing we're working with. So I recommend small change and small incremental change over a number of years, just like getting your exams and qualifying. You know, you need to do the same thing on the digital side. You might not have to do it yourself. You might partner up with people. You might work with people like Lance. But, you know, that's a small change evolution, even though I encourage everybody to take on this role revolution, because I do think it's that fundamental to finance.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just because we had a previous guest mentor on the show, and he described this sort of transformation as better never stops. And like, if you're doing these big programs, you can see them coming to a halt because, you know, the people are getting around the table. There's probably more pressing priorities. But if the changes are small, there's that compounding effect. And to your point, momentum. I mean, Lance, you know, I suppose coming over to you then, right? You know, with this sort of, we're living through this COVID-19 crisis at the moment, at some point there's going to have to be some momentum shift, momentum that Chris mentions, towards bringing our skills to the fore. So I think modeling could be an interesting one to look at. Is that something that we should be doing now, so we can get ahead of when we start returning to business, or modeling the impacts on our business of this? I mean, when's the right time to be modeling at the moment?
Oh, look, I mean, I'm a bit biased. I think you should always be modeling because you know, I just don't think, I don't think that business is simple anymore in terms of understanding. I think we should also be using data analytics. But, you know, I guess right now data analytics is less relevant because we've got unprecedented time. So any data that has been historic is going to be less valuable, depending on the data set, of course, right? Even if you look at, you know, we're trying to look at data around swine flu and Spanish flu and start looking at correlations. But what's everyone doing right now with all of these cases is they're modeling. They're modeling, you hear about the governments talking about modeling. They're modeling their decision and their social distancing. So modeling is actually very, very important right now. And I think people will be more open to it. So I think it's a great opportunity to learn financial modeling. And I think this is our big challenge in finance, because we're so used to black and white, and modeling is a bit of gray, right? Actually, it's a lot of gray because really there's so much uncertainty. So why bother? But that's not the point. The point is not to get the answer. The point is to have a tool that you can look at multiple answers and look at a distribution of answers and then make a decision. Of course, decisions don't get made in a vacuum, but we know if revenue is going to fall through the floor, we're going to run out of cash. So what do we do? What do we do with our staff? What stimulus packages do we get from government? And you put that into a calculator like Excel and see what impact that has and what impacts that has on the business. And so I think, you know, it's an incredible opportunity to learn. I think also, so one part is the application, but also the learning and the opportunity to sort of, we're all stuck in our house, we're all stuck at home, hopefully. Most people are observing that. And so, if you're not on a Zoom call, what are you doing? You're probably spending time with family. I think it's a great opportunity to sort of check and sort of capture the moment and use the time wisely. Whether it's, like I said earlier, playing with hammer beats with my daughter, or playing table tennis with my son, or learning financial modeling, or building more tools. I mean, even for myself, I did a webinar. Sorry, I attended a webinar, one of the first webinars I haven't attended in ages, on data visualization, because I know even my data visualization skills have a long way to go, particularly within the Power BI sense. So I think we have an opportunity to learn these new skills. We've got more time. We've got different pressures, but we're also more isolated. So I think, isolation breeds some really challenging mental challenges for us. And so I think, how do we keep our mental health up? I think we've got to stimulate our brains, because you're not getting stimulated with human interaction. I think we've got to stimulate our brains with learning. It could be learning digital finance and some of the concepts that you talk about, Chris, or learning about financial modeling, or learning about analytics. But we're going to have this opportunity to sort of really reconnect with knowledge, and even the tools, right? So we spun this up in less than a week, jumping on the Zoom, and so I think for us, we're just used to working this way, whereas a lot of corporates are still struggling with that transition into the new digital world with all these tools of Loom, Zoom, Trello, and Slack. And, these are tools which I've been using for 4 years, and I love them. And now people are like, oh wow, there's a tool that does that.
Yeah, Zoom and Slack are doing pretty well at the moment, I would have thought. Someone's doing all right. Yeah, no, I think back to your point at the very start there about how people are dealing with uncertainty and potentially challenging the fixed mindset that we find a lot in finance. And for me, even when you model and scenario plan, I think finance people see that forecast as an absolute number. And then we go to the business and sort of, through variance analysis, we say, why didn't you hit that number? But if you compare that to the coronavirus situation, wouldn't we be spending all of our time working out why yesterday's numbers weren't quite right instead of fixing the problem today? And I think that's, if there was one thing that finance takes out of this, it's sort of like a mind shift change that, intervening into the sort of the results and the operational nature of the business and managing risk as you go is much more valuable to the business and solving problems. And that's kind of the shift where we need to go, whether it's, data visualization, modeling, data analytics, there is value in all those things. It just depends what questions you're trying to answer. But I think for me, you've just got to, the first point is thinking differently about your role and saying, right, how can I help? And how can I intervene? And how can I use this data to make better decisions, instead of saying, right, we've now made our forecast and I'll come back in 4 weeks' time and tell you whether it was good or not. But I've got this thing against variance analysis. I think it's a sort of, if you talk to anybody in your business, the business will tell you that anybody who talks to them about a variance between actual and forecast is just pissing them off, because there's so many variables to get that right or wrong. Overall, was it a good performance? Overall, was it a good thing to do? And we have to intervene much more regularly and quickly and sort of, value led to sort of bring that benefit to the business. So starting with the mindset, and then all of that other stuff can follow. And Lance, you're right. As much as we bang on about technology, I think we both say the tools are kind of the fourth thing on the list. We argue about Excel is dead or whatever, but, it's like, how are people approaching this? What is the problem we're trying to fix? How can we bring value to the business? What's the process to get this from a conversation to a dashboard or whatever it is? And then it's like, well, okay, you want to use Power BI, I want to use something at an enterprise level. So it's not about that. We've got such a learning journey to go on before we even talk to the technologists.
Yeah. There's something that you said, Chris, which I think is great. So when you go and you march to the business and you say you're behind plan, why or what, the thing that people have to stop and think about is, so what? So what?
Yeah.
So what? I'm behind plan. And then the next question is, now what? Right? So I think we've got to move away from the backward looking, this is what happened, and you naughty person or you naughty business or whatever, and move that conversation forward. Like, the rates of infection are the rates of infection. Whether they're right, wrong, or whatever, it doesn't really matter, but the trajectory is not good. So let's do something about it. Let's self-isolate, let's lock down, and let's look again, right? Let's put action into the numbers, not just, sit back and say, oh, bugger, we've just lost 1,000 people, overnight. I just think that's relevant, but we've got to move it to action. And that's exactly what you're saying. I think we've got to move the conversation into less about the tools, but more about how do we actually get this stuff through.
Yeah, Lance, I do agree with you and Chris, but I think it's the right type of action I think you're getting to. And I think it comes back as well to the point you've both been saying about mindset. It's great to see that there was one company I know, and they reached out, and they were sort of trying to bounce off ideas about implementing a business partnering program. Great, we're in this particular time, it's a good thing to consider. But they were running straight to the tools and the how and the what. They weren't thinking about why am I doing this? Getting the mindset right. And I think that's going to be the challenge for a lot of us, particularly for those in finance who might be sort of furloughed or laid off at the moment. And I was talking to someone about a hotel chain. They laid off 80% of their finance team. And, that's a warning signal. People in finance should not be laid off, not because we're special in any way. We've so much value to give to the business. But I think that's, if you see finance getting laid off, it's because there's probably the wrong mindset there, either within the business or in that finance team. And it's a bit, I'm going to draw a parallel with this crisis, is that the people who are staying at home, taking the right purposeful actions, are the ones who probably have the right mindsets about this crisis. But there are people out there who perhaps may not necessarily feel the need to stay at home, who may not feel the need to learn. So how can we help those people adopt a better mindset? Not selfishly speaking, but for the betterment of our whole community, whether the society we live in or our finance community. How can we help people get that better mindset? What do you guys
Don't
think?
we just barricade them and lock them up or give them fines?
Well, I'm more the constructive type of mindset. But no, I think, if we were to look back ourselves and we said, okay, did we do the best things we could do to contribute? Did we do enough ourselves? That's the sort of way I'd come with it. Obviously, we could lock these people up. But
I think, for me, it's sort of for anyone to take action, and I look at this model a little bit in the presentation that we did with Brad, but anyone who wants to take action, they've got to be getting two things right. They need to have a level of motivation and they need to have a level of ability. And if you're highly motivated, you're highly able, you're going to do stuff. So if I've got, I don't know, if I'm responsible for scenario planning right now, I'm not even going to think about this. I'm just going to be saying, right, I need to get on with this. I need to create scenarios. But I might be really unmotivated at the moment. And I might be thinking, you know what? I don't want to look at this stuff. I don't want to change because I'm not motivated to do my role. And you know what? I don't have this ability and you want me to learn right now. So people are massively distracted. So I think you've got to, the motivation part is really difficult because it's very personal. So on a general level, you need to just build out ability and you need to encourage people to learn in very small steps, whatever it is that is a priority to that team. And the team is going to be different for everybody. Some people are going to have business partnering teams. Some people aren't. Some people are going to have a data team. Some people aren't. So it's kind of assessing the need and then building it out in very small steps. And on the learning side, how many people have downloaded Zoom, Slack, over the last couple of weeks and just got on with it? I think we can continue that journey for people.
Why does it take a good crisis?
Well, because absolutely. Because when I talk to finance people, the most common thing is, I don't have time for this, Chris, or it's. But it's almost like you're spinning on that wheel so fast, you can't see that there's an engine over there if you just pick it up and lob it on the hub. It's just that people need to realize that the world is changing, and we're doing a lot of education in this area, and we're starting at very high levels. We're not talking about the nuts and bolts of a Monte Carlo simulation or working with machine learning. We're talking about this is data visualization. This is why a person in the business might act better if they see a number like this, or your relationship with the business might be different if you approach your conversation in a different way. Really high level learning to show people that there's a different way of working, but we take really small steps to get there. I think at this time people are enabled to do that themselves. There's sort of Coursera and even LinkedIn Learning, TED, YouTube. There's loads of places to learn, and there's probably a video for everything out there as well if you don't want to sit there and read.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. I think and you got to come back to what you're doing, right? Strengthen the numbers, right? It's actually your podcast series and the discussions that you've had is a great way of learning. I mean, I still quote Chris on when I explain RPA, I say it's a macro macro, and a versus a micro macro. Like everyone understands macros in Excel. This is a macro macro, right? Now, I would not have found that definition and the way that he articulated it so well, and now I use it all the time. And I do give you the credit for it. I say, look, I didn't come up with this, but it's. So I think if there's anything that people need to take away from it's the opportunity to learn and listen and get motivation and get inspiration from people and finance leaders around the world is probably where people should start. So I think if we're trying to help people who sort of, every finance professional that I have met or teach in sort of webinars or do face-to-face training, 80 to 90% of them are just confused. They're just completely confused. They've got no idea. They know they need to do something, but they don't know what it is. They don't know where to start. There's just this mass confusion. And then there's tools being thrown at them left, right, and center. They're being asked to do all the sorts of new stuff. And by God, learn Python and coding and machine learning. And, it's just a joke. I mean, I think you just got to really give people space. And I think, now's the best time for that, because we're going to be in our homes. We're not going to be venturing out. So I think, listening to hopefully more people will be listening to this, but I think that there'd be an opportunity to really, and I think you said, Andrew, that you've actually seen a drop off in numbers during this crisis relative to other times. So I think people are, to probably Chris's point, people are still trying to grapple with the technology change and working from home, let alone, tune into a podcast. So I think that, it's going to force the change. I feel that the crisis is going to force some form of adoption of the tools and technology.
I think you touched on something there, Lance. And let's use the numbers for the Strength in the Numbers Show podcast. They were significantly down last week. They seem to have jumped back up again. But I do feel that it could be related, talking to folks, it could be related to habits. And we just get ourselves into these habits in finance and that sort of usual sort of spinning disc record player, we're too busy to think about these new things. I'm delighted people have stopped tuning in just because it was part of their commute. I want people to be purposefully thinking about their next steps in finance and how we can go and not just help our organizations through this crisis, but also our society, so we're all better positioned. I mean, the frustrating thing for me is just someone, again, via the show, sent me a link to a Bill Gates TED Talk from 2015, talking about the next big sort of crisis for humanity will be a sort of huge epidemic. Now we're in a pandemic, and it's just but Lance, with what you share with us on modeling and with Chris talk about digital finance in terms of how we bring the analytics and stuff together, we had the power in our profession back in 2015 to get ahead of this, and we didn't. So what can we learn to move on here? What can we be doing?
Everyone's going to be in very different sort of places right now, and again, if people need to focus on their mental health and physical health or families, that's absolutely the priority. But I think what I would say is that, that what we try to do in a normal case is very similar to what we try to do, now, and because our project approach kind of fits into any company at any time. And, the tools that people are now working with are actually a massive step forward, for me and us, I'm sure, because a lot of the time, like you say, it's like, I don't have time for this. But the first thing that we try to help people to do is kind of build a community within the business, or build a community, across the business or in their profession. And it's like, how do you build a community? Well, if you're on Slack or if you're on WhatsApp, but you just start adding people who are relevant to your problem, relevant to your learning. And then I think that the two next steps are critical for me. And it's about sharing ideas, because I think a lot of people forget to actually sort of bring everybody together and to share ideas and say, what is this about? And a safe space for people to ask dumb questions like, why don't we use pie charts, or what is, RPA, or, whatever it is, that just a safe space to sort of share ideas and ask all those dumb questions. And then you're getting closer to a starting point where people have got these self-insights. They start to realize there's a need for change. And that's when, we have to start creating time. And I think the shift that I've seen in the last 2 years in the digital finance space is that, whereas before everybody was double hatting on this stuff, maybe even triple hatting, it's like, oh, who wants to do the data project? Who wants to play with all this data and come up with something? It's like, yeah, I do. It's on top of your current job. The shift that I've seen recently, even in sort of smaller companies, medium-sized companies, they're getting data teams together. They're getting people to come in. They're getting partners to come in. So there's no longer double hatting to arguably create the time. But obviously, if you have been furloughed, or if you feel you have time or the focus now, like, your learning goes with you wherever you go, right? Your learning goes in here and walks to the next job. So, I would encourage people to sort of create that community. It doesn't have to be a company one, share ideas on this, ping me, ping Lance, ping all of us, put everybody on the sort of 12-person summit that we just did, and ask those questions. You'll get replies, and then you start to see where this is going, and then I'm sure you'll naturally start to shift to those small changes and the small learnings, and you'll find time to do this stuff. And change for me, now I sort of view this quite differently, is that change for me actually is all about managed learning. If you are going to make any change, it's not about having a big town hall or a big inspiring CFO saying, yes, we're going to do this, and then no behavior changes happen at the senior management team level, so why should I bother? It's actually, it's small change over time, managed learning. And if you've got time now, start learning these new digital tools. For one, explore what we're talking about. You're doing it naturally through hard change, downloading lots of Zooms and Slacks, as we've said, but it could be Power BI, or it could be a book on sort of being an audacious finance business partner. Seems to be selling quite well at the moment.
It won't leave the top 10.
But I think we're also very fortunate. Now, I've used this background, which has got this nice little donut chart, which if you haven't seen the donut chart, start using it. But I think we've got a fantastic opportunity to really look at data in a different way, and how that it really affects our lives, and understand modeling in how it affects our lives, because we're in the middle of a crisis. So if we actually think about what is happening right now, I think we have a huge opportunity in finance to help. I really, really do. I'm not just saying it because it's the right thing to say. I think we have an opportunity, provided we have the right mindset and we have the right mental strength to deal with it. We've gone through so many challenges as a finance professional, through month-end closes, through year-end, through dealing with auditors, through dealing with all the stresses that any normal finance professional would have gone through. dealing with crises around the numbers being wrong. I mean, every single finance professional has had a situation where someone said to them, that number's wrong. And you're like, why? And then they give you an example, and then you say, okay, yeah, it must be. And then you've got to go and unpick it. So I think we're in an existential crisis at the moment of humanity. And I think, we can really use that as an opportunity to leverage our way of approaching problems and the way of being calm without getting too emotional. I think a lot of people see accountants as boring and flat because we're calm, and sort of we've built this resilience around being boring in the eye of the storm. And actually, whilst that's in one way one could say that's derogatory, I actually think it's a bit of a compliment, because I think we can keep calm in these situations, but also look at keep our eyes open around some of the amazing visualizations and tools and data that's flying around to really help and understand and see what the world of data is going to give us. But really understand that how dangerous it is as well. Like, data is actually you've got to really realize that data is the new oil, and it is very powerful. And just like my tweet and my LinkedIn post today around an absolute data visualization fail by the ABC News, I think we've got to really see these things happening around us and learn from it, but realize that we can help if we have the right mindset.
Yeah, I love the example that you give there about the visualization fail. And I think, that's one thing that people could have a bit of fun with right now. It's like, look at the information that's coming out from various sources,
download all the data
from the government all the way down to, a guy in a room who's put an app on the front of something. And
this, right? That's this thing here.
Yeah, exactly. Buy me a coffee. Don't know anything about the guys, but have a critical eye, look at these things and say, well, does this give me the information that I need straight away? Or do I like these colors? Or, what's this actually telling me? Because you can take all of this, it's quite personal to people at the moment. So I think they will invest time in sort of thinking these things. And it's exactly the same sort of thinking that you're going to have in your business. It's like, is there a problem that we need to solve for our, marketing team? And is there a way of presenting this information? Or is there data available to construct something, whether it's understanding the problem more, or fixing a problem, or visualizing a problem, modeling a problem? It doesn't matter. It's like, start having those thoughts about, why does Chris not like pie charts? Is he being, just a techie nerd? Or is it that we really can't understand them as human beings very well? Or what's the most significant KPI at the moment? Is it infection rate that's sort of undetected or detected? Is it the death rate? What is it? And what actions can we take out of this? Because I think a lot of what we try to do in business is make sure that any insights given is actionable. Whereas a lot of the information at the moment, it kind of like, and to your example, Lance, it sort of goes out there into the ether, and people just expect you to like it because it's information. It's like, not all information is equal. I want you to tell me why I should be staying in my house for the next 3 months, to be honest. So is there a way of constructing information to do that and communicating that in a way so I really want to do that? And have an opinion about this stuff, because that is a skill that you can take back to the business in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
So we should re-record this in 6 months' time and look at Sweden. Sweden have decided not to lock down. They've decided they're not going to do any of those social distancing measures. They are going to do social distancing, but they're not going to lock down, right? And they're not going to close schools. They're going to keep bars open, and they're going to basically say, we're going to treat you as adults and make sure that you behave as adults, and we'll see how this goes. And so I think it's it's going to be interesting. So Chris, to your point is like, well, no, show me that. I need to know the data first. I mean, come on. I mean, the data's there. Like, you look at China, you look at the people who've come out of it, and the only way that they came out of it was the fact that they went into lockdown, and the fact that they were really strict with lockdown, particularly in China. And so, it's fascinating when you step back and you look at what's going on in the world right now, when you've got leaders, particularly I was quite vocal on socials around Australia not locking down quick enough. And we know when, and you look at what's going on in the US and Trump and the crisis there. I mean, there's flight radar, again, a great visualization of the number of flights that are live in, at the moment. And the US is still covered with flights. Like there's just people still moving around and flying everywhere. And so, to your point, Chris, it's like, you can have data, but if it's not important to people and they don't care, well, it's meaningless, So it's got to be fit for purpose, and actionable.
So I suppose then, chaps, in terms of wrapping this up, I thought we've had a really great conversation, and I think that's a very sort of important point to begin ending on, is that people have to care, whether it be about the data or making the right decisions. I suppose, what would your parting thoughts to our audience be? Maybe we start with Chris on that one.
I think everyone's got different priorities at the moment, and there's certainly family first approach in my house. I was interviewed the other day, and someone said to me, what's the thing that you took most for granted when before COVID, coronavirus? And I said, it's my family and my relationship with my kids, So I think, look after yourselves first. But then, if you have any time after fixing all the immediate things that need to be done, think of maybe creating a list to say, look, where were the pain points during this transition? What are the things we could be improving on? What on the people side could we look at? What on the process side, the tool side? And maybe build up a bit of a list. And like I say, start using the tools that you're already using, that you're already sort of being asked to use to build a community. To use an example about a bit of insight, I reached out to someone in my Slack community in China, and I said, how's it going in Shanghai? And, they're a CFO of a medium-sized company, and they gave me a sort of finance version of what's happening. It's not the ABC or the CNN, it's a finance version of what's happening. And it was really insightful. I think those communities, these networks, and this sort of learning as we go is an absolute priority now. And it's on you guys. So if you have any time, then please invest it wisely, because we have a lot to learn that could benefit us when we go back, and we will get over this. It's the green shoots are in China, so within 2 to 3 months, I'm hoping that everyone's feeling that they're getting back to normal.
Thanks, Chris.
I guess I'd echo what Chris was saying around the community and learning. I think for us, it's a perfect opportunity to sort of help and understand the crisis that we're in, and where we can add value. And for businesses, that's around cash flow. So I think, it's a key to understand what it's like. How come right now suddenly cash is the most important thing? Why hasn't it been always the most important thing? And so I think, it's a really great opportunity to stop and think about how we add value, and in what ways we can contribute to the business, and I guess to the society as well. So I think recognizing that in today's times, cash is critical, cash is survival. And so understanding how we can improve that through conversations, through understanding, through modeling, through analytics, through all the tools, but really realizing that it's a scarce resource, cash. And I think the other scarce resource is time. So, in the end, you probably even actually more scarce than cash is time, right? We're not going to have, please God, this crisis again in our lifetime, right? It's here now, and we have the time. So let's use it and spend it wisely. So whether that's reconnecting with your family, and I think that's probably one of the most important things. But again, what are you going to do to make sure you've got food on the table for your family as well? Because if you're not caring about that and it comes back to cash, then obviously you've got to juggle those two. But in the end, it's make sure you use the time wisely, and understand that cash, and understanding how cash interacts with the business, and a three-way cash flow model, is important. in understanding how to add value in a business. Businesses are not valued on just PE multiples. It's cash. People buy value in cash, in dollars.
Awesome.
Or pounds or euros or whatever else.
All the above. Bitcoin.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah,
It's
it's a global audience. So no, thanks, lads. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate making the time for us today to share those really, really great insights on this special episode. So thanks, fellas. And again, look after yourselves and again, look after each other and our communities too. And let's keep building our strength in the numbers. Take care.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, guys.
So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to know more about our guests today, their bio, and follow up on the resources mentioned during the show, you can find all the relevant links and more at sitnshow.com. There you'll also be able to get access to earlier shows, read the latest blogs. There's also an opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter, which will give you heads up as to when the next show is coming out, latest events, news, and anything that's going to be relevant to help you have a fun, rewarding, and successful career in finance and accounting. And just before you go, we really appreciate your feedback. If there's something we can do better on the show, something that's not working, or something you'd like to see, even a guest you'd like for us to invite onto the show, someone who you think might be able to benefit you more and also the rest of our community, please let me know. You can email me. I'm at andrew@sitnshow.com, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just drop me a message so I know how you found me and we can connect. And really, it's our community that'll make the show. If we keep engaging and driving each other on, we'll keep on building our strength in the numbers. When all is said and done, if we can do the numbers better and finance better, we'll create more opportunities for ourselves, our friends, our families, our communities, and our businesses. So until next time, have a good rest of the week, take care, and let's keep building our strength in the numbers.